Hello everyone, this is Darcinovia once again, and this is another re-review. Now, for those of you who are wondering, why am I re-reviewing another novel that I've already reviewed? Well, looking back at some of my old reviews, I think a lot of them tend to be riddled with a lot of problems. From terrible camera, awful mistakes, and barely freaking talking about it. I mean, this book, I did not even a 5-minute review on this novel. Paradise Share, I really loved this book. And I felt like I didn't do this justice. And the reason why I am doing this review is I feel like that I could do better. Now, next time I do another re-review, it's going to be on Tatooine Ghost. But without further ado, let's begin on Paradise Share. Now, for those of you who don't know what Paradise Share is, it's part of a trilogy written by A.C. Crispin, which is a series of Star Wars novels that came out in the late 1990s that detailed the backstory of Han Solo. No, not like the movie Solo. Han's past as his childhood, for the most part, isn't really explored. This explores Han when he's in his late teens. Which is good, because I don't think anyone who's a fan of Han Solo wants to know about his parents or know about his childhood. We get glimpses here and there about what his childhood is. Now, considering the fact that not much material is written about Han Solo before he meets Luke and Leia, there's a lot of material to work with. And this is the only story I can think of where Han Solo is not with Chewbacca. I mean, Han and Chewie are like peanut butter and jelly. You can't imagine one without the other. For this particular novel, there is no Chewie. He doesn't meet Chewie until the sequel, The Hutt Gambit. That'll be a video for another day. But about Paradise Share. Paradise Share first introduces us to a Han Solo who is 19 years old. When this novel was released in the 1990s, this was the earliest we got into the timeline in the novels pre-Episode 1. Because George Lucas had very strict mandates on how far you can go in the timeline. Because George Lucas did not want novel writers to write prequel stories, because those were his stories to tell. And this story takes place over a decade before the events of A New Hope. So we get a young and inexperienced Han Solo who is an orphan. Now, the thing I found that was really clever about this novel is it introduces Han in a way, at least the youth, very slowly. It introduces this character. The first chapter basically is pretty dark. The introductory chapter to Han Solo. A friend of his, probably the closest thing he had to a mother, dies right in front of him. She sacrifices himself in order to protect Han and helps him escape. And while in this chapter, it would make sense later if you have context why Han would be not happy with other Wookiees dying for him because of his experiences in his youth. But in the second chapter, we get glimpses of Han's past, on who Han was prior to meeting Garrus Strike. Now, this chapter, it doesn't ruin the mystery of Han Solo. It actually just dives deep enough in his past where we find out, Han's life sucked. But not too much. We don't know who his father is or his mother in this chapter. But if you've read the Corellian trilogy, this novel actually, we find out why Han and his cousin Takun Sal Solo hate each other and despise each other. They meet each other in their youth. Talking style Solo is older than Han, obviously. Han, wanting to know who his family is, meets his cousin. Things don't go so well for him, and we get a glimpse of what this character is like, and he's a psychopath. And another thing I'm probably going to do a deep dive when I eventually get to the Corellian trilogy is what a great villain Tarkin Sal Solo is. But I'm not going to talk about that. But what this chapter does well is it doesn't actually remove the mystique of Han Solo. He still has the mysterious past that you don't know much about. We get a glimpse of what his childhood was like, but we don't know much more than that. And of course, the chapters after it, Han would do some odd jobs just because that's in character for Han, because that's what he would do in this age. He doesn't have the Millennium Falcon yet. He doesn't have Chewbacca, so he's working for a criminal. And in these chapters, Han meets his first love of his life, Berea Thane, which we don't know what that's her name at this point in the story. And also, this is one of the few novels, at least one of the first novels I can think of, where we actually get to read somebody visiting Alderaan before its destruction in A New Hope. Now, of course, other characters would get introduced, which wouldn't play a big role in after this story. But throughout this novel, Han would meet Berea Thane and actually learn things about her past and who she is, and it would be Han that would end up saving her life, preventing her from dying. And yeah, now later in this novel, Han would end up meeting Berea Thane's parents, who we find out that they're rich, and they don't treat him very well. They kind of treat Han badly because of his upbringing, and of course Han having multiple identities. But we find out something interesting about Han, that the person that was his love of his life, Berea Thane, her father respects Han and actually admires him and likes him and ends up helping him. Towards the end of this novel, Han would, when things are going right for him, he would go to the bank on Coruscant, trying to retrieve his funds, only for everything to go wrong. And Berea Thane going through, because she is used to it's a sort of a drug. To think of it as a drug, and she's going through withdrawal, and she thinks of herself as a burden to Han, so she ends up leaving him. And of course, in the end, Han would actually get inside the Imperial Academy. Why does Han want to get into the Imperial Academy? Because that's his dream. It's his dream to become a fighter pilot. Of course, we all know how that would turn out. But Han, being a naive youth, we get to get a glimpse of the man he will ultimately become. Now, throughout this novel, since I'm done with talking about what I thought of the general story, throughout this entire novel, Han is very naive, but we get glimpses of him being street smart. Han isn't like what we see in Solo. He feels like the character that we would expect out of a young Han Solo. Han isn't naive. He isn't stupid. He isn't a goody little two-shoes like he is in Solo, which makes his arc in the original trilogy redundant. Han is a person that has been through a lot of shit, and you could actually see that. And this novel, I really wish I would have done a better job of giving it the review that it deserves, because Paradise Share does what, despite it being not canon anymore, it feels like it respects the story of Han Solo, respects the mystique of Han. It doesn't actually destroy the character like Solo does. It doesn't do what the movie did and just, okay, why is Han named Solo? We don't learn why he's named Solo in a stupid way. It was his stepmother, essentially, that did that for him, found out that Han's name was Solo. That's how he discovered his name. He didn't make it up. some guy didn't make up his name on the spot. I mean, the very concept of him being named Solo by some Imperial stormtrooper is fucking stupid. I mean, holy shit. I know. That's off topic. It has nothing to do with this review, but I think it's relevant considering the fact that this was the first attempt at doing a story for Han in his younger years. And I could actually buy this version of the character being the future Han Solo we would see in A New Hope. He's not a disillusioned man that we see from A New Hope who is pessimistic, who doesn't believe in anything really, who's mostly out for himself. This is a Han Solo that is very naive and who has high hopes for his future. This is a Han Solo with dreams before the reality slaps him in the face. This is Han Solo before he meets Leia and Luke and Chewie. This is Han at his youth, and this is the kind of story that we don't get to read that much in Star Wars. Yeah, canon would eventually explore Han in his youth through books and comics, but I don't think that they did it as well as this book did. Consider the fact that this book, for the most part, kept Han's past a mystery and didn't actually come up with stupid, contrived reasons why he's named Solo in the first place. Now, I've been praising this novel up to high heaven because I think it did an amazing job of giving fans at the time, when the expanded universe was pretty much at its infancy, giving them a story that I don't think they knew that they would want. This novel could have easily have been the movie that Lucasfilm did, but they chose to do something else that completely didn't make sense. Paradise Share would easily make a great movie, but it's not meant to be. A.C. Crispin did a great job giving us a young Han Solo, and this doesn't feel out of place. For me, Han's in character, what you would expect out of Han Solo, especially in his youth. I think this novel did a great job making us empathize with Han, feel bad for him, actually kind of, knowing that he's going to end up with Leia anyway, make you feel bad for Berea Thane, who has been through circumstances beyond her control. But the thing I like about this novel is it respects every character. Not one character feels useless. Han's companion, I can't even pronounce his name. It's very difficult to pronounce his name. His people barely have any appearances. They look kind of like tigers. And I thought he was pretty cool. He doesn't appear that much throughout the novel. Not one character feels useless. And that's the thing about this novel. It did a great job of making you want more. There's 2 more novels in this trilogy that I have to revisit. But there's another series of books that I'm going to revisit too. The Han Solo Adventures by Brian Daley. But that's a topic for a different time. Now, this re-review I think is vastly superior to the original, because I feel like I got more into detail about Paradise Share. Now, where do I rank it? Is it essential? Do I think it's essential reading? Yes, I think it is. I don't think you can actually not read this book. I think it's one of the best expanded universe novels. It's part of a trilogy, I think, that did a great job of telling the story of a young Han Solo. Not only is it a good book that stands on its own, I think it's a good start of a trilogy of books. I reviewed this back in 2015, and before my current rating system existed, I didn't really give it a rating that I feel like it deserves, but I'm going to give it this. I think this novel qualifies as a classic in terms of its rating, because I think it does a good job of respecting the source material. It respects the character of Han Solo. I think any Han Solo fan that is disappointed with the way the Solo movie treated this character, and you're looking for another Han Solo story, something that doesn't diminish who the character is, you cannot go wrong with Paradise Share. There's many ways you can get this book. You can get it on Kindle. If you can find the hardcover that Barnes & Noble released a few years ago. You can get all of the trilogy for very cheap. There's many different ways you can get this book. Hopefully, in the future, Lucasfilm will do a Essential Legends for this novel and along with the rest of the trilogy and give it the audiobook treatment by Mark Thompson. Crossing my fingers if that happens. Anyway, this review has been going on long enough. I'm glad I actually gave this novel the re-review treatment that it deserves because I love this book and along with the rest of the trilogy. Peace out and see you guys next time with another video.